So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this, the first of our webinar series, where we're going to be talking about how we are catalyzing the Caribbean economy through sustainable entrepreneurship. I am Cardell Ferguson, General Manager at the Barbados Youth Business Trust, BYBT, in Barbados, and I am joined by some esteemed members of our presenting panel who will bring to fore this discussion. This discussion is being facilitated by Youth Business Caribbean. Youth Business Caribbean is a network of independent organizations and programs supporting young people who want to build their entrepreneurial skills and businesses in the Caribbean. We serve to strengthen the ecosystem for young entrepreneurs in the region. And this is one of the ways that we're doing it by providing you with an introduction to support organizations that will help to strengthen our ecosystem. Today, our discussion is with ecosystem players who have been working in the field to ensure that the network and the operating space for entrepreneurs is strengthened and is made well for each one of you. So this morning, it is my absolute pleasure to invite our first panelist, who is going to take the perspective of identifying some of the gaps that we've seen in the ecosystem and to help us to understand how his organization is aiding in building the capacity of business support organizations across the region. So I now welcome Michael Gordon. Michael, you're muted.
Of course.
I think what you want to be saying needs to be heard.
Yes.
I'll turn it
Good
over
morning,
to
yes,
you. And
yeah.
I know that
Okay,
based on our conversation, based on the discussion, that it's going to be very insightful. So what I also, before you get started, what I would also like to let our participants know is that they can send in their questions. There is a question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. I want you to use that to help us to see the questions so we can address your concerns. Okay? So good morning to everyone, and this is going to be as engaging as you make it. So let's get the engagement on. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Cardell, and thank you, colleagues. Good morning, everyone. Of course, good morning to my fellow panelists. So today, so my name is Michael Gordon, as he indicated. I'm the General Manager of Gibbons Consulting. We are a consulting firm that focuses primarily on capacity development and in particular enterprise development, entrepreneurship development in the region. We recently completed the OECS Techie Incubator Accelerator program in the OECS, and we are right now working on the ecosystem development for the BSOs or business support organizations in the green sector for GGGI in right now, and the OECS, a project with the GGGI and the OECS. So in terms of so as I said, our company focuses a lot on entrepreneurship development, and we have had a lot of experience in this area. I myself have been in the sector from over 30 years, both in the private sector and public sector, and also the NGOs as well. So in terms of what we see, how we see this happening is that it's very important for when we're dealing with entrepreneurship development in general and any sector development such as green or talking about social enterprises, that you have an ecosystem to support the development of the entrepreneurs. So what we have done, particularly with the green project we're working on right now, is that we did some surveys to try to figure out exactly what's happening in the sector. Right? What exactly are people saying? What are the issues that we need to be addressing? The most important thing we first have to realize, though, is what do we need to have in an ecosystem to be effective? And when you look at the green sector, and in particular, we see that there are several things that needs to happen and needs to be in place. We need to talk about the green network. who are the agencies or the business support organizations, we call them BSOs, who are the BSOs who are part of and who should be part of the system. The other thing we speak about is there the mindset for green entrepreneurship, or even for social enterprises? Do we have that mindset in place? Do people make decisions and when they make decisions, they say, I want to get a green solution to this problem? Or do they just go with whatever is available, regardless of whether it's green or not? And it's really important to understand that there's a very symbiotic relationship between the green economy and social enterprises, because they sort of work together. Having an eco-friendly business and eco-friendly organization is really important to support the social enterprise, and also to support the environmentally the green sector. The other thing we have to ensure is that how can we support institutional strengthening of the entrepreneurs in the economy? And we'll talk more about these things later on. How do we encourage product development? How do we encourage market development? For example, do we have affirmative program to support for the government of the country to support these enterprises? How do we encourage innovation? And network development is another one. And to do that, we need to understand what are the key components that need to be in place for example, in this case, environmentally friendly business. We talk about what are their products and services, what are their mission and principles, what are their short and long-term sustainability goals, what are the supply chains that we need to have in place to support what it is they're trying to achieve, and do they have eco-friendly facilities, or facilities that are very supportive of the community and the social networks? What is the employee educational culture? What are the marketing, customer education and awareness? In other words, is there widespread or broad-based knowledge transfer to the wider community in terms of supporting these social enterprises? How do we support innovation and research? So those are some of the components that these enterprises will need to have, and so therefore, when the ecosystem is put in place, they need to support these particular issues. So it's really important that we work when we're developing a system of an ecosystem to support a particular community, that we acknowledge where the issues are in the community, and what we are doing to put those things in place to support the community. So some of the issues and some of the opportunities have been identified, and the issues identified is these entrepreneurs are usually in sustainable agriculture and biodiversity, waste reduction and recycling, renewable energy and eco-friendly practices, local sourcing and circular economy, innovation, use of natural resources, and also how do they focus on ethical and social responsibility? How do they understand what their role is as a social enterprise to support ethical and social responsibility? And so some of the opportunities we identified is how do we get market opportunities and export potential for these entrepreneurs? Because one of the more important things that we need to recognize in these kind of enterprises is that they need to identify strategies that will make them sustainable. So how are they going to generate revenue so that they'll be able to continue their business for the short, medium, and long term? And what do they need to do now to put those things in place? And what sort of support will they need from the ecosystem to help them improve their sustainability, their ability to be sustainable? So there are several areas that the BSOs have a very, very important role to play. Understanding what the entrepreneurs are. What we recognize is that the entrepreneurs identified some areas where they said they need a lot of support. Of course, financing is always number one. They always indicate that financing is the biggest challenge that they face. Another area they identify is getting the access to resources and inputs. How are they able to compete in the market? How are they able to develop and compete in certain markets? The other issues, there may be some regulatory and policy hurdles, and sometimes what you realize is that there are some legislation that may and other regulations that may put these smaller businesses and social enterprises at a disadvantage to the larger businesses and the other organizations. So it's really important that you do things that are more sensitive to the issues of these smaller businesses and these social enterprises. How do they also get training and technical and training support? How do they make themselves more accessible to extra country and extra regional market opportunities? How do we give them access to training and education so that not just for the entrepreneurs themselves, but even for their team, so that it will help them improve their performance. And of course, ensuring that we able to have all this information accessible. The point I was making to the team, yesterday when we were discussing this, is that it's like, people have, if you have to establish an education system, an education system has certain roadmaps that are fairly very well known to everyone. So if you want to become a doctor, here are the things that you need to do, and you know exactly what you need to do. It's the same thing as required for an entrepreneur and for the social enterprise. Understand what is the roadmap that they need to have, and what they need to, and where can they access these services. That's why the networking that you put in place in the ecosystem will be important for us to support the entrepreneurs. So I'll stop here now. And we will willing to answer all the questions and answer any question that you may have. Because what I would present is going to be pretty long, but I just try to seek out, summarize some of the key issues that we need to face in any program that will support the development of the ecosystem for the entrepreneurs. So I'll stop here and I'll pass it back on to you. I'll pass it back on to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction into the gaps that we are seeing. Mr. Gordon, so some of the things that you were able to tell us is what are some of the support areas that our social enterprise are in need of when starting their businesses. And it is quite interesting, some of the research, and I'm hoping that we are able to share some of the findings from your research with our participants and our social entrepreneurs here in the Caribbean. Now, there may be some of you who are not quite au fait with the terminology social enterprise. So a social enterprise is a business that has, as it's set up, an impact. So what it's set up to do is to create an impact, and it is sustained by the activity of its commercial arm. So it's a two-pronged business. So it has a social or environmental or impact arm of it, and there is also a commercial arm of this business. So the profits from your commercial arm is then reinvested into the business to make it sustainable. One of the other things that we are trying to do through our sustainable entrepreneurship program is to ensure that the entrepreneurs understand how to create their journey map from where they are right now into a more long-term vision of where they would like their businesses to go. What are some of the green initiatives that you can employ in your traditional business to make it more sustainable? How can you improve efficiency? How can you improve the way in which you operate to reduce expenses, to reduce waste, to reduce your footprint on our environment? All of those are part of how we see sustainable entrepreneurship working in the region. Again, a reminder that you too can contribute towards the discussion by adding your questions, your comments in the chat and in your question and in the question and answer sections that we would address later in the discussion. So I see one question already come in, but we will answer that question later in the session after we have heard all of our speakers, and we are open to having a very candid discussion with you. And I thank you for that first question, and let's keep them rolling. Next up, we would invite our panelists from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and that would be Ms. Kieran St. Omer. I hope that I'm not butchering anybody's name today, so please forgive me that if that is the case. But Kieran, it is my pleasure to have you sharing the stage with me today. And I look forward to hearing about your perspective as it relates to banking and finance, as it relates to social enterprises and sustainable businesses in the Caribbean. So I will leave you to take it over from here. And I look forward to learning more about how our banks can become more social and impactful in the way they lend to our entrepreneurs.
Thank you for that introduction, Cardell. And certainly well, let me introduce myself. My name is Kieran St. Omer, and I am a project manager with the bank. Currently, I'm leading the Greening of the Financial System initiative, which is a regional initiative to encourage or to more or less align the financial systems. Our key stakeholders in the financial system be commercial banks, regulators, and of course, our consumers, entrepreneurs, those persons who need financing, align the architecture that we have currently to be able to improve access and availability of finance for sustainability linked activities. So with that, I would definitely like to say that the ECCB is very delighted to be part of this forum and to contribute to this session, such an important initiative that is being undertaken by the Caribbean Business Youth Trust. And what we'd like to see from this discussion is a greater level of awareness and participation. The ECCB as a key ecosystem partner, what we've recognized the importance of the financial system. And when I put it this way, before what you would find, you believe that sustainability linked goals or the sustainable development goals, which most of our member states would have committed to by signing on to the Paris Agreement way back in 2015, was more or less led by ministries of environment, the government, sustainable development, climate change. And the financial system was not a priority, but now we see a global shift in that, where systems, products, capacity have to be aligned, and a lot of capacity building is being done globally and as well across the region. And via the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank's initiative for greening the financial system, it's an umbrella initiative that tackles all sectors of the economy. And I have to say sectors and beyond sectors, we look at institutions, and if we can put them into broad categories, we look at the financial sector entities, meaning policymakers, regulators, institutions that we use every day, like commercial banks, credit unions. We are now rolling out a series of training and as well development initiatives with those institutions to get them aligned with financing sustainability linked business activities. And one of the key things we'd like to see is within the ECCU on a broader macro level, what we've assessed so far, there is not that much of a flow of sustainable or even climate finance. It's becoming more difficult globally, not just with our small island developing states, but globally. You hear other lesser developed countries or developing economies complaining, or should I, for lack of a better word, let me say, putting a call out there so that the availability of climate finance can be made, and the pledges that we saw the more developed countries making, and hoping that they fulfill those pledges so that they could help finance sustainable development goals. This takes me to the point in terms of why would the ECCB have an interest in doing so? We see that our mandate, more or less, is to ensure the stability of the financial system. And what that means, we have to be able to ensure there are proper procedures, guidance, policies. We're monitoring and have enough market intelligence to assess risks. And we as the central bank, the regulator, as well as our regulated community, meaning the licensed banks, we have to ensure that they as well have the proper risk mitigation procedures and tools available to price risk. What we note based on surveys we've conducted, that there's a lot of capacity building to be done and tools to be implemented and shared and developed. And this is what our initiative is focused on at this moment. We have a climate risk assessment and tools framework that we're developing that will equip commercial banks and other financial entities with the necessary capacity to assess and price the different exposures. And my point in saying that is, you will hear it, and I know during this discussion here today, persons may comment and say, when we go to the banks, it's very hard to get a loan or financing, and they may shy away. And we see it in when we study the macroeconomic indicators, a lot of lending goes into consumerism and not necessarily social enterprises. And we see that gap and we want to derive funds there. So it means they must be equipped, be able to assess risks with those types of institutions and initiatives. And this is part of our overall greening the financial system. We'd like to mainstream the use of appropriate products, more innovative financing instruments. When you think of businesses in renewable energy, when you think of businesses, different green businesses, this is the key limiting factor. Not being able, there's a general high risk perception in the region, and without data, we cannot put a price on it. So once we're able to improve that, we see lending and credit being done in a more easier fashion. It will also lead to the development of financial instruments like green bonds. We see a lot of that happening globally. Blue bonds, we have our neighbor Barbados would have issued a blue bond as well. And we also see that in the ECCU, there have not been any flows. And I will end by saying countries as well, our member states, governments are also assessing their needs. And by the commitment to the Paris Agreement, they would have had their national determined contributions with various targets that they have to fulfill. And this takes us into adaptation. How do we unlock financing and funds to able to fund transition into green growth and development, green jobs? And this is very and critically important to the ECCB when we think of assisting the region and improving livelihoods across the region. So I'm looking forward to a broader discussion on those topics. Thank you, Cardell.
So Kieran, you have really brought it. And I think that, as Michael would have said, and as you would have told us, financing plays a very, very big role, important role in the success of our social enterprises. Because social enterprises are mission driven, and a lot of the time they do not follow traditional ways of assessment when it comes to financing, they become entities that are unfinanced, if that word is understood. Yeah. So it is harder for the bank to then assess their risk profile because their revenue stream might not be traditional. Their cash flow may not be as standard as other businesses that have products and services. And most of the time, their businesses may be service related. And therefore, it may not be one that banks may be able to assess clearly. So if you have a question as it relates to financing of social enterprises or experiences that you have had in trying to get financing as a social enterprise, please share with us in the question and answer section or in the comment so that we can then address it as part of our discussion. Before I move on to our next speaker, I would like to then introduce the members of Youth Business Caribbean so that everybody is aware of whom they can go to for the type of support that we have as part of our mandate. So we have members in Anguilla, which is the Anguilla Youth Business Foundation, in Barbados, which is the BYBT, in Dominica, which is the Dominica Youth Business Trust, in Jamaica, which is the Jamaica Youth Business Trust, in St. Lucia, which is the St. Lucia Youth Business Trust, in Trinidad, which is the Youth Business Trinidad and Tobago, sorry, Jonathan, Youth Business Trinidad and Tobago. We are open to assisting whomever comes to us. We provide training, we provide financing, whether it is access to finance or financing as a last resort. We also provide training I said training already, business mentoring. So if you come to us and you have an idea and you may not have the business acumen, we can assign you with a business mentor who will walk with you through the process of gaining that business skills. We also provide you with networking and marketing opportunities. So should you need someone to hold your hand through the process of setting up your business from idea to implementation, please reach out to one of our members in any one of the territories that we've mentioned. So at this point, I will let you be introduced to one of our members of the Business Caribbean, our member from Dominica, our Dominica Youth Business Trust. So next up, we're going to hear from Eamon Gibbons of the Dominica Youth Business Trust, and his perspective is what is being done for entrepreneurs who have ventured into sustainable entrepreneurship or social enterprises. Over to you, Eamon.
All right, thank you, Kadel. Good morning, everyone. So, like Kadel said, my name is Eamon Gibbons. I'm with the Dominica Youth Business Trust, and I'm the project officer at the YBC. Previously, I held the position of the social enterprise administrator, which entailed us implementing the social enterprise incubator, which I will get into a little further. So, like Kadel rightfully said, what we do as Youth Business Caribbean, really at the heart of it all is entrepreneurship training, business plan development, mentorship, and a lot of hand-holding. And that is what we are able to do on the ground with the capacity that we have. Now, just over 3-4 years ago, few members of the Youth Business Caribbean, being Barbados Youth Business Trust, St. Lucia, and Dominica Youth Business Trust, embarked on implementing the Social Enterprise Incubator Project. Now, this was funded via the EU program. So what that meant is we were able to train entrepreneurs with the social mindset. And when I say social mindset, I'm speaking of green and eco mindset as well. We were able to train these persons in the likings of social entrepreneurship. So they were able to take their idea or their current business and move that into one driven by a social mission. So essentially, it was a specialized training in social entrepreneurship. And that entailed them doing or developing their business plans, developing the theory of change, as well as developing the business model canvases. Now, what we see on the ground is, and I would go off of what Mr. Gordon said earlier. He asked the question that, is there a mindset for social and green entrepreneurship? And from performing or implementing this social enterprise incubator, we have seen that there is the mindset for social and green entrepreneurship. In Dominica, we were able to train 19, in St. Lucia, 20, in Barbados, I think maybe even more. And there are more persons interested. There are a lot more persons interested. And it has picked up quite well. And the success stories from these entrepreneurs have been amazing. And the impact that they are able to do is amazing as well. So under this social enterprise incubator, we're able to offer them specialized training, support as it relates to the business plan development, mentoring as well, developing the business acumen, handholding, etc. As well as, that's one of the major success stories. Each and every one of the entrepreneurs from Dominica, St. Lucia, and Barbados were able to access grant funding under this project to launch or start their social enterprise mission in one way or another. So that was one way we were able to give them this access to financing. And of course, access to financing has been an issue. It has been mentioned throughout the conversation before me. One of the challenges as well, another challenge as well that we have seen is one of information awareness. Now, from the beginning, we had to explain what social enterprises are. Now, that's because it's not a common thing, or in a sense, the term is not as common as we think it is. So social entrepreneurship is alive in the Caribbean, I would say. but persons are not aware of what it is and what the formalities of it is. So persons go into business and they know, okay, they want to change the community one way or another. They want to employ persons in the community. They want to help single mothers. They want to help persons with mental illnesses, help the elderly. They just want to help. And they do so through starting a business and using the profits of that business to drive their mission. That's what social entrepreneurship is. And we see a lot of businesses already doing that, but they are not aware that they are a social enterprise. So that's one of the things we have been able to do as Youth Business Caribbean, is raise awareness of social entrepreneurship, what it is, and what are the formalities, what are the avenues to go about doing a social enterprise. So another challenge that we have seen, and I believe Mr. Gordon may have mentioned it as well, is the framework and differentiating social entrepreneurship from traditional entrepreneurship. When it comes to register that business, right now, I can speak confidently for Dominica. When we register that business, it's not registered as a social enterprise. It's registered as a regular business, a for-profit business. But we know from research done, let's say in the UK, businesses registered as social enterprises. And that makes a difference as to how these businesses can access financing, especially through grant financing, because there are grants out there, but they may ask, are you registered as a social enterprise? And that can become an issue. So these are just some of the ways us as business support organizations have been pushing social entrepreneurship, social and green entrepreneurship. And of course, we continue to network our entrepreneurs with our network of persons, organizations that we know. We grow them every day. One of the other success stories that we have is, entrepreneurs are able to use their business plans that they have developed to access grant funding outside. So one of our entrepreneurs here in Dominica was able to win the OECS Island Ideas competition, as well as be part of the Commonwealth Youth Program Awards for striving in sustainable green entrepreneurship, becoming a nominee in that field. So that's just some of the ways we as business support organizations are able to assist entrepreneurs and help them go from launching stage, idea stage, to implementation stage. And even after implementation stage, we assist them in their day-to-day one way or another. Because we see entrepreneurs come to us all the time, and I speak for Dominica, Barbados, and St. Lucia. Entrepreneurs come to us all the time for advice. How should they move forward with this? They may need assistance with applying for this grant or applying for this loan as well. We just heard from the ECCB and in regards to financing. One of the things every bank will ask for is a business plan. Now, this business plan will differentiate or will be different from a traditional enterprise plan. So this business plan is going to be a social enterprise plan. And one of the things we had to do is tweak what we call the traditional plan to be a social enterprise plan, to include things like the theory of change that maps out the impact of that mission, as well as ensuring sustainability and profitability of that business, because that is important in terms of the access and financing, especially through loan financing. Unfortunately, I don't think any of our entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, have accessed loan financing as social entrepreneurs. And I'm hoping this can change as we stimulate the conversation in the Caribbean. And of course, as BSOs, overall, we just do a lot of hand-holding. We've helped in terms of the specialized training in social entrepreneurship, as well as developing the plans from idea stage to launching stage. And with further capacity, because right now the Social Enterprise Incubator project has come to a close. The funding has ended. So with further capacity building, further tools, training personnel as well, I think we are able to change the face of entrepreneurship in the Caribbean on a whole and make a difference where it matters. And I'll end there.
Thank you very much, Eamon. And one of the other things that, so to add to what Eamon was saying, we supported under this project for the launch of the Social Enterprise Incubator in Barbados, St. Lucia, and Dominica. We supported 52 persons to start social enterprises across the three countries. We are in the process of extending this project. So one of the things that we are looking at is a sustainability model for the continuance of the Social Enterprise Incubator in Barbados, Dominica, and St. Lucia, with an aim that we can address social enterprise development in our other member countries. So those are some of the things that we are gaining partners to help us to do, and to work through all of the different facets of getting social enterprise recognized in the region. Now, one country that has been in the forefront of ensuring that social enterprise take its rightful place in the economy and the development of its people is Jamaica. And so it gives me pleasure to introduce Dr. Knife, who would give us the perspective from the Center of Entrepreneurial Thinking of UE in Jamaica, as well as the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange. Now, those are two things that we can learn a lot from across the region to help us to develop social enterprise and sustainable businesses in the Caribbean region. So, Dr. Knife, over to you. I am waiting with bated breath to hear what you have to say.
Give thanks. Can I share the screen? Let me share the screen so I can. Okay, I have this PowerPoint that I'm going to run through quite quickly. But let me just start by saying that social entrepreneurship is not a new concept. It's just really new words, because the history of the region has been much in social entrepreneurial. You know, if you review from enslavement to the maroon settlements to free villages coming up to mutual societies and in modern day cooperatives, the concept tends to be the same. So we need to be clear. So this is not something that we are going to try to adopt from out of Europe. We have been leaders in these practices for centuries. Yes. So when we look, let me just go back to talk about this presentation. When we look at the context, we're speaking about what's happening in terms of the sustainable development goals. Every Caribbean country also have a vision that they have developed, which captures these things as well. You have to look at what's called your MSME and entrepreneurship policy to ensure that it is updated to include social enterprises, because there's a challenge that our Virgin in Dominica might be facing. You know, we look at the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange, or working groups that have been developed to support these kind of sustainable businesses, finalizing legislation to ensure that it is legitimately recognized in the society. And of course, look at working groups to evidence the contribution of the SEs to GDP. Yes, I will not go through all the slides, but I just want to bring something to your attention. So look at the SDGs, the first 5 or 6 goals, which are the foundation goals: no poverty, zero hunger, clean water, access to health, education, gender mainstreaming. All of those things are some of the practices that SEs tend to adopt in their mission and your program development. And this follows what is called generally a triple bottom line, but in Jamaica and the Caribbean, we need to focus on what is called a quadruple bottom line. So we're looking at economic value, social value, environmental value, and cultural value creation, with a significant footprint of the Caribbean people. So we match those back to our goals and outcomes of national program, but you realize that every sustainable community development program requires that same kind of quadruple bottom line. How you create environmental value, how you create social value, how you create economic value, whether we're talking about the traditional economy, the blue economy, the green economy, or the cultural or the orange economy, it falls within the framework of social, environmental, cultural, and traditional businesses. There are ways in which these things have been measured. So if you look at Porter's Social Progress Index, which was developed, and this is one from 2014. There are 3 key elements that you observe: basic human needs, foundation of well-being, and opportunity. If you look at the components that fall within these elements: nutrition and basic health, water and sanitation, shelter, access to basic knowledge, access to information and communication, personal rights, personal freedom. These are all the things that people are involved in sustainable enterprises and social enterprises also develop within their programs and projects. But note that social entrepreneurship follows a process which is similar to the entrepreneurship process. What are the ideas? What are the opportunities? What is the concept you are being developed? What are the resources that are required? You identify and access those resources. Launch and grow the venture and harvest the venture. And sort of an ecosystem is developed must match this entrepreneurship process. How are you addressing the social problem, which a problem is really an opportunity to actually provide a good or a service to satisfy an unmet need? What are you motivated by? We're not motivated simply by profit. We are motivated by creating an impact that improves the quality of lives of people, where you're empowering people to empower themselves. So know though that social enterprises, because of the nature of your operation, they must adopt even more stricter and better business practices, because the issue of trust is extremely important. So we'll argue that a social enterprise is a venture created or configured to provide one or more social goods or services, applying high ethical standards and effective business practices to seize opportunities and solve problems at the community and national level, generating both monetary and non-monetary value for stakeholders in a sustainable way. I like to argue, based on research that I've done, that Marcus Garvey was the first person to establish a transnational social enterprise. As a matter of fact, what we have done in Jamaica is to actually, in a sense, copy what Marcus had done, because Marcus Garvey, when he established the UNIA, he was actually selling shares as a way of generating capital for that business, which I argue was the first global crowdfunding platform. Just one of the ways that social enterprises tend to finance your operations. You know, and just look at his model. He created these major companies, the Black Star Line Shipping Company, Negros Watch Corporation, and other businesses that will support the African Communities League, that will support the mission of the UNIA. So again, this is not some new concept that we're going to adopt from the Grameen Bank or from the EU. These are things that our people have been doing for a very long while. And it creates what is called a blended value. So when you're talking about measuring the impact, there are several tools that we can use. And we use what is called the social rate of return on investment, which employs, as I already mentioned earlier, the theory of change. We're looking at both the enterprise value and the social purpose value. The social purpose value captures the cultural value, traditional social value, and of course, the environmental value. And that creates what is called the blended value. And there are indices that we use to do these things. That the enterprise index of return, the social purpose index of return, which gives you the blended index of return. I can't go into detail because of a time constraint. But how do you measure the social rate of return on investment? This is a methodology that we'll use. You know, what is the project and business description? Describe the theory of change, recognize and ranking the stakeholders, determining the inputs, determining the activities, the outputs, outcomes, impact, and attribution. And of course, key is to determine the indicators and using some kind of monetization tool. So this is the flow: inputs, activities, output, outcomes, and impact. And of course, in terms of the metrics itself, you need to identify the purpose of the theory of change, develop the mission and define the desired change, identify domains of change, strategic priorities, the pathways to change, and of course, review and adopt the theory of change. Because remember, when you cannot change the context, you have to change the methodology. And these are different ways of monetizing the value creation, whether it be hidden prices, incurred loss, shadow costs. Several different ways are there, but ultimately what you're doing is to look at what is the social benefit divided by the social cost. We must also take into consideration that you're not the only person who's impacting the dynamic. You have to look at what is dead weight. Dead weight meaning what would have happened even if your program was not implemented. There's attribution, there's also displacement. So you want to understand whether the program that you're implementing is displacing other programs that already exist. So rather than do a displacement, you want to collaborate to make the programs even more effective. But when you're going to speak to people who you want to support a sector, they want to know how is it that this thing here is impacting the space? How is that is impacting the GDP or the GNP of the country? And it is this kind of discourse that led to the formation of the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange. When you look at the traditional aggregate demand curve, it is C, consumption plus investment plus government expenditure, export minus imports. This doesn't take into consideration the practices that are taking place in the social services sector. None of us across the region incorporates that within our calculation of GDP and GNP. So when you add the value created from consumption by a social enterprise or the investment generated, because each grant given to a business or a venture is an investment. When you add the investment of a social enterprise or you add the exports that comes from a social enterprise, it increases the aggregate demand curve. It shifts it out to the right, which leads to an increase in the output of the country. Now in Jamaica, we had recognized that based on the amount of research that was done. And so the Jamaica Stock Exchange approached us at the center in terms of how do we evidence some of these things. And what the team at the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange says that one way, given that we have the evidence that it is working, of raising capital for the social enterprise is to create a platform on the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange where persons will feel comfortable to send money through that platform to support the social enterprises that are listed. Of course, there must be a metrics that is used to determine your listing. And we always argue that there are three key elements. Governance. You must have an effective governance framework. We have developed an index to assess your governance framework, which you can get an objective assessment from. Your strategic planning portfolio. Let us know what your strategic plans are. Yes, and your business development portfolio. So those three elements are crucial. Your governance structure, which is a precondition for support. It makes no sense you finance operations that do not have the capacity to absorb and utilize resources efficiently. But it must also have a very clear strategic framework. And in that strategic framework, which also contains the theory of change, you want a robust M&E framework with clear indicators for the output, outcome, and impact, because those indicators will be monetized to feed into calculating the social rate of return on investment. And what they did in Jamaica then was to create a dual platform. One, where persons are able to send funds directly to support a social enterprise, but there's also another platform where persons are also able to invest in a social enterprise with the expectation that there's going to be some form of return on that investment. So there's a dual platform right there for the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange. But what is important for the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange is that the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange is an entity which is trusted. Because to be listed, it means that your governance structure must be solid. You must have high levels of transparency and accountability in your practices. So it sends the signals to persons who are willing to support that this is something that you can trust, because trust is extremely important, especially in a region where there are questions about how is it that we utilize funding that we receive from external places. And I think that partnership has led to a real serious increase in the buy-in into the social services sector. Because again, I had gotten a chance to rewrite the National MSME and Entrepreneurship Policy, where we include that chapter on social enterprises. I'm now currently updating that policy again to broaden it to increase things of the orange, blue, and green economy, which again maps back onto the social enterprise. And important for us to remember, that while the SDGs and the national plans are at the macro level, the social enterprise business model is what mirrors those at the micro level. And importantly, social enterprises endogenizes growth. It's not a trickle-down model as in the traditional business model, because the services are actually directed to the beneficiaries, and the enterprises are sometimes located in the geographic area of the beneficiaries. So if you want to have a positive and immediate multiplier effect, social enterprises represent the best kind of vehicle to do those things. Finally, in all the discourse about mainstreaming that is taking place, social enterprises by default mainstream all those cross-cutting themes, because social enterprises tend to focus on those who are the most vulnerable across gender, across youth, across persons with special needs, and of course, incorporating all the best practices that deals with climate change imperatives. So let me stop right there. So give thanks.
Such a lovely spirited presentation, Dr. Knife. I totally enjoyed it, and I will look forward to the Youth Business Caribbean working more closely with you to strengthen our initiative as we build out our social enterprise incubator and our sustainable entrepreneurs program. So you now have the opportunity to get involved in the discussion, because we want to hear from you. We are doing this not because we want to hear ourselves, but because we want to provide you, our audience, with information that you can make informed decision. Note that there is a lot going on in the region as it relates to sustainable entrepreneurship, sustainable business, greening of businesses, and also green projects. So, is there anything you would like to hear more from us about? Drop it in the chat. Now, before we go into checking in on the chat and checking in on question and answer, let me ask one question. Dr. Knife, you had said about indicators of impact.
Yes.
What are some of the indicators of impact you would recommend for someone going into a social enterprise?
All right, remember, each of it has to be contextualized based on what your specific focus is for your organization. Yes?
Yes.
So, what we'll argue, generally, when we're looking at some of these indicators, you have a program, a training program that seeks to build the capacity of youths who were previously not employed. At the output level, the indicator might actually be the amount of youths who are trained in that program. Now, that can be monetized, because you can now know what the market cost of such a program would be. But even more importantly now, how is it that that empowerment have affected the life of the person? Because that now moves to the outcome level. Because they are now able to generate an income that can be used to support their family. It's an important element, because if that was not being done, you ask the question, what have been the cost to the society? What have been the cost of that young person not being engaged? Jamaica is a nice example, meaning that we target a lot of at-risk youths in Jamaica for training.
Right.
But youth is not engaged. He's at risk of becoming a victim of crime or becoming involved in crime. If he's involved in crime, he might end up in prison. You ask yourself, what is the cost of keeping a young man in prison in Jamaica? Which is about 1.5 million Jamaican dollars.
Wow.
Which means that if you have a program with 100 youths and you assume that about 20% of those youths might end up in prison, you're speaking about a program that at the output level alone will save approximately $30 million.
Yes.
But then you start to ask, if those 20 youths are trained and now become productive members of a society, what is the value that would have been created? Which is what is the outcome level. And there's an impact level, which means that there's greater social cohesion in the society, which reduces the need for expenditure on programs that might support social cohesion. So the indicators might be germane to each specific program, but you want to ensure that they are clear at the output level, the outcome, and the impact level. Because when those are clear, you're now able to monetize these things, so you can translate the discussion from being one which is somewhat hypothetical to one which a lot of the bankers, like my sister Kieran would want to see, so she can make her decisions, that she can say something which is empirical, that says, okay, when I give the Youth Business Trust 10 million
EC dollars,
then if you give 10 million EC, for each dollar spent, we are generating
this
$3
impact
of value.
Yeah.
So her funders can say, okay, Kieran, that makes sense. Let us do it. Because usually you'll find that the rate of return on investment from a social enterprise is phenomenally high. With traditional businesses, you get like a 25%, and that's constantly high. With social enterprise, you get returns in the hundreds of percentages. And we have done more than, numerous SROIs, and it is consistently the same.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So this is a conversation that is going to be a long-term conversation, Dr. Knife. So we will reach back out in touch with you. Kieran, so my question to you is, what are some of the findings? Sorry, what are some of the findings that you have had with your member contributors, the commercial banks and the credit union, as it relates to support for sustainable entrepreneurship? Because I know you are doing the greening of the banking system. Tell me some of the findings that you have generated in this project so far.
Thank you for the question, Cardell. What we found in undertaking surveys at this stage, we're 1 year into launching this initiative and assessing and more or less doing market sounding exercises on different fronts. We see our institutional capacity needs significant improvement. The financial institutions, they are very eager to learn because they do get applications. They do state that they receive applications for lending in those these different initiatives, but do not have the right products. So there's a mismatch. You mentioned earlier the mismatch between revenue flows and your payment schedule with the bank, being able to the capacity to repay or not default on your debts. And all of these are taken into account that there are not appropriate financial instruments to cover those. And when you bring in the risk element, being able to assess the risk element of it, it is important. Now, Dr. Knife did mention some very key, very impressive stuff. And when we look at value creation, for us at the central bank, we have looked very closely at the value of financial assets in the overall regional financial system across the 8 countries. And we see the risk in terms of when you look at climate risk with storms and hurricanes intensifying in terms of frequency and the level of damage. Some of our entire GDP have been wiped out several times for countries. I mean, more than once. We look at Dominica. Dominica has had to recover quite a bit.
And Grenada?
Grenada, yes, the list can go. It's been quite, it's something. And yes, the international community is turning the light on when we see climate change and they're looking at transitioning and reducing 1.5 to stay alive. You hear those key sound bites. For us in the region, this has been, we face those risks, these exposures. It's like what you hear a lot is it's an existential threat. And it is in terms of livelihood, social enterprise, knowing that you've set up your business or initiative and a storm comes around and you have no more income to be generated. And the risk of that is the institutions, can they respond to that? We saw that, if I could reference the pandemic, where we had to be creative in terms of putting in place appropriate measures to help financial institutions, not only, but homeowners, business owners, to be able to continue beyond. We saw the entire country or globe shut down. So there was no economic activity taking place. So you can liken it to the impact of that to us facing a storm and nothing happening. So from a climate resilience or managing risk or mitigating risk perspective, this filters down to the social enterprise, everyday man being able to carry on with their livelihoods, make payments, access finance. We were able to put measures in place where there were moratoriums that were given to financial institutions. We worked collaboratively with the governments and the individual institutions to put moratoriums, be it 6 months, I think it was extended to at least a year or longer, based on the conditions in the economic environment. So I reference this as a very good example where, for climate risk, what we're hoping to do, develop products and equip the banks with customizing their own financing programs or facilities or grants we can access in the international community and have it filtered down via the institutions to assist our social enterprises, green enterprises. And it's something that is very predominant in the region. We've not called it that before, like Dr. Knife was saying. This is our way of life. Our coastal areas, biodiversity, is something that you find, it's a mainstay. It's the livelihood of many of our citizens. And when you look at the lending in terms of rates, we don't see that much funds flowing into that because it does not have a steady flow of revenue income. So it's about designing the right financial instrument to match the risk and to help.
And taking into account the legislative environment in which the member organizations
on-
are working in.
You're right. So on that note, what I could end in saying that we at the ECCB are putting in place the right regulatory institutional framework. What we have a unique position as a regional central bank with our small island states. When you think of economies of scale, comparative advantages, we've developed those policy frameworks. We work collectively with banks, key regional institutions, supervisors, the business sector organizations, different civil society organizations to form policies. So we're leveraging that by taking an economy-wide approach. And Jamaica has done extremely well with the capital market development. We're hoping to develop our capital market in the ECCU. We're much younger than Jamaica, so they are a shining example of what can be done in terms of social exchanges. And we want to, junior stock exchanges, all these initiatives are very good for us to learn from and run it through the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. So we're hoping to see a very huge change in our financial system that will support those everyday enterprises, livelihoods, and definitely creating green jobs and reducing poverty in the region. So on that note, I'll stop here. Kadawame, thanks.
Thank you very much for that perspective, Kieran. There is a question in the from Leander Tate. She asks, from countries trying to replicate the Jamaica model for supporting sustainable entrepreneurship, what are the first 3 things you would suggest getting done? And this is for Dr. Knife. And what are some challenges, unexpected challenges that we should look for? I wanted that question answered out in the open so that everyone can learn from it. So Dr. Knife?
All right. I'm unmuted. I'll actually type a response, but there are a couple of things that I'll mention. First, we need to understand what the landscape actually is. Yes, so I am saying that we need to do baseline studies. We had started this thing here years ago on a Commit 2 project that was supported by the USAID. And the first thing we did was to actually do a baseline, because we have a very robust social services sector. The term social enterprise is a new term which has emerged. So in your baseline study, you'll find that the typologies varies from CBOs to NGOs to faith-based organizations. All of these organizations are creating social value in numerous ways. The gap, however, is how these organizations are sustained. They're usually dependent upon grant funding. I say, no, you need to create your own independent, diversified income stream. It's where the enterprise element comes in. So we're saying you need to move from a dependent model to an enterprise-driven model. So doing the baseline would be the first thing that I would suggest that you need to do. Secondly, you need to engage the stakeholders, both the state and non-state stakeholders, so they can understand that because of the absence of a legislation, social enterprises will not be recognized in the traditional business sense by your company's office of, whether it be Jamaica, Barbados, wherever. But the business model. So my colleague from Dominica, who spoke about the capacity building, the business model is what will shift from a traditional business model to one that incorporates the contribution bottom line. So if you use the regular business model canvas, it speaks to traditional businesses. We have what is called a business model for entrepreneurship, which I will share in my version, which speaks to by Morris et al., which I can use and see I can adjust those to reflect it. So the stakeholders must recognize that you have entities now who are moving away from a dependency model to one in which you are going to generate money, but it is clear that the money is generated, not go into the pockets of the business operators, but into fulfilling the mission of the organization and growing and expanding the business. And remember, that social enterprises have to use much better business practices than regular businesses. Why? Because it's a trust element. And if people start to think that you are dishonest in your practices, it shows a real bad light on the entire sector itself. So we actually emphasize that you must have stricter business practices by social enterprise and those who are involved in sustainable business in sustainable development because of the nature of the relationship.
Right.
Most important, third and most important is the MSME and entrepreneurship policy within each locality. Those policies must be updated to include chapters on social enterprises and social services sector, which we had done in Jamaica. I actually got the chance to do the last policy in 2017, 2018. I am now actually updating the policy again as we speak to ensure that we disaggregate it further to emphasize the role of the blue, green, and orange economy.
Orange economy.
And also to make it clear that you need to mainstream certain things like the youth, gender, people with special needs, and climate change in an effective way. You know, one of the examples that we wrote that all those three groups must have access to at least 50% of our resources that are made available to support any kind of development program as a part of the mainstream. So policy amendment is extremely important because once the policy has been amended, it creates a platform now to amend the legislation regarding business practices. And without the amended legislation about businesses, you'll find that banking institutions might be a bit more hesitant in providing funding because I'm going to ask you, are you registered as a social enterprise? But there's no framework to be
Exactly.
as a social enterprise. So what is happening now is that the process that we have used in Jamaica has gone ahead of certain legislation, but you have engaged the stakeholders so that there's an awareness of what is happening. And so persons are willing. However, let it be clear that banks in Jamaica are still not lending money because this is a social enterprise. They will lend you the money because you're involved in businesses. Yes?
Yeah.
Majority of funding for social enterprises tend to come from grant programs with the international payment partners because they understand what is happening there. But you'll find that as there's more evidence which is taking place to show that social enterprises are actually financially sound, they use the same business practices as traditional businesses. The difference is how profits are utilized. They are utilized to grow the venture and to fulfill the mission of the organization rather for personal achievement. Yes, it is used to finance. So that is where I think you need to do. Baseline study. Marketing,
engagement with the players.
Exactly. And finally, policy and legislative changes. Those are the three steps that need to be done.
Good. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Johnson, are you seeing any questions? I'm not seeing any.
No, not seeing any others.
All right. So at this juncture, I would say that today's objective was greatly met. And I am very, very thankful. I'm hearing clicks, but I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'm very thankful to all of our presenters, Michael Gordon, Kieran, Omer, Eamon Gibbons, and Dr. Knife, for bringing to us the different perspective as it relates to ecosystem players in this environment of sustainable entrepreneurship. And I am thankful to each one of you who have taken the time to join us for today's discussion, and also to thank Jonathan from the YBTT for being our technical support. Tomorrow, we will be having the second in this series of catalyzing the Caribbean economy through sustainable entrepreneurship. And tomorrow we will be discussing from an entrepreneur's perspective, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the successes, and how can we support the entrepreneurs to create a sustainable business that meets an impact in their community. So join us tomorrow, please, and learn more about some practitioners in the field of sustainable entrepreneurship and social enterprise. So we look forward to seeing each one of you tomorrow, and for you inviting all of your family and friends to join us for tomorrow's session. All right. Does any one of my panelists want to say anything before we leave?
Yes, just to thank your organization for inviting me and to really become aware that so much work is being done in the region in this area of social entrepreneurship. I mean, we're more than willing to share all the research that we have done, you know, and we have developed a large number of tools that people can use. So, you know, the idea is one hand can't clap, many and make the work.
Exactly.
So let
I
us,
always say that.
yes, let us
We've
share
got to
what we
work
can share.
together.
Yeah, man, share and get this thing you're moving. I mean, this will be fine naturally as Caribbean
And
people.
I am of the opinion that if for our ecosystems to be strengthened, we need to move from an ecosystem to an ecosystem to an ecosystem where one person recognizes that they are part of a bigger picture, and we can all work together to ensure that this picture is painted in its brightest vibrance.
Oh, which is really Caribbean.
Yes, let it be Caribbean, right?
Thanks.
Does anyone else have anything to say before we leave?
I'll
Eamon?
just add that we are
Kieran,
very,
yes. Mhm.
yes, we at the ECCB are excited and we remain committed to the transformation of the region. And it's all about taking collective action. So we are certainly definitely looking forward to being part of forums like these and at all levels or stratospheres of society, you could say, for us to spread the word. And as you said, it's really when it reaches that person and impacts their livelihood. The average man on the street, well, we always say at the ECCB, leave, well, no man behind. And we are always taking an inclusive approach, and we're looking forward to improving that across the region. Thank you, Kadel and team, for
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
bringing us on.
All right. Michael, I'm going to give you your closing remarks at this time. I know you have to leave us soon.
Yes, I have to start. I have to go start the meeting now. So thank you very much for inviting me. There's so many things I went. Time very short. Is really how do we focus on what the entrepreneurs need and what we need to do to support them, and particularly when it comes to sustainable. One of the things we recognize is that the sustainable mindset is becoming a little more entrenched in the region, particularly because of the natural disasters we've had in the region. And for example, I remember talking to one BSO and some entrepreneurs in that country, and I realized that in Dominica, for example, there's much more, there's a greater awareness of sustainability because of the history of the past,
Natural
because of the
disasters.
hurricane and natural disasters. So you find that people are starting to internalize some of the things. We don't have what is defined, what may be defined by other institutions as the perfect green enterprise, for example. But there are persons who have proponents of it and are moving in the direction to becoming a more perfect enterprise. So so the thing is, we have to understand where we are on the development chain, development chain, and what do we need entrepreneurs within the region to become better, to become more sustainable, right? How do we try to get, while grants are important, how do we help them develop more revenue generating opportunities to improve their sustainability? So those are the kind of things that we want to deal with. I'm as an entrepreneur, development person myself, I try to tell persons that a grant is an investment money. So you shouldn't just spend it because you got it.
Exactly.
Just spend it. It must have a return on that investment as well. Even though the cost of it is zero, there must be a return on that investment. So, but as I said, I can talk about this all day because this is really something I'm passionate about, but I will leave it here for now. But thank you very much for inviting us, and thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you for sharing your perspective.
Very invaluable contributions.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing your perspective. We truly appreciated it. Okay, Eamon, it's now time to say your big bye.
I mean, overall, I just want to say a huge thank you to all the panelists, Dr. Knife, Mr. Gordon, Mr. Omer, for your time. The information I was shared here is truly valuable. I know for us at Youth Business Caribbean, we're going to take away a lot. And I hope for you in your institutions, you got a lot from us as well in terms of, catalyzing the Caribbean economy, as we coin this webinar series, And please do make an effort to tune into the entrepreneur session tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. or day 2 of this webinar series. So thank you once again. Yes.
Thank you, Eamon. Thank you, all of you. And thank you again, Jonathan. Thank you, each one of you, for coming. And so we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 6, where you will hear from our entrepreneurs and you can ask them about some of the challenges, what are some of the lessons they've learned, those kind of things. And it's also our opportunity to motivate them towards sustainability, because if you don't know what is going on, you can't help others up to the state that they would like to get to. It is again my ultimate pleasure to have moderated today's session, and I wish you all a great day and a lovely route and journey towards sustainable entrepreneurship. All the best today.
All right, sister. Cool.
Bye, everyone.